So, Dan, after the show, I'll tell you what the president said after I reacted to what JD told me that the Pope told him when the Martians are coming. Oh, wait.
Oh, we're on air. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
hi. We're on air.
Oh,
hi.
Everybody heard that, Sean. Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, and it feels like Thursday from all the news that we have seen in the past few hours. We're going
There used to be an axiom that was like the 3 weeks around Christmas and New Year's were really slow and boring.
it's not anymore.
Not the Trump era. It's not.
And of course, we're all talking about this Vanity Fair story. Susie Wiles giving very candid interviews to a reporter there who sort of has this history of chronicling the work of chiefs of staff. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, right now, let's see, it's 8:31. The job numbers should be coming out. Dan, I know you're tracking that. And just to give people a quick overview, right now at 8:30, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will be putting out the job numbers from October and November that were sort of, backlogged because of the government shutdown, and everybody's watching these to get an idea of how the labor market is doing. Dan, do we have them yet?
Yeah, it looks like we added 64,000 jobs versus 45,000, which was the estimate. So that is good. Not the strongest number, but could have been worse, as they would say. And it looks like the unemployment number went up slightly to 4.7 from 4.6. I think I have the sound off, and so I'm looking at the bottom here as they start posting this. But look, obviously jobs are one of those things that kind of catches headlines. It's an easily digestible thing and something that the average person pays attention to. So as JD Vance goes to Pennsylvania tonight to speak on the economy and affordability, no doubt we will hear about this. But I think it, feeds the argument that the economy is neither great nor terrible. We're somewhere in between, and that's what makes the politics of this so fascinating. Trump people think they'll be proven right pretty soon, and, Democrats are ready to pounce if not.
Well, look, and beyond that, too, as I've mentioned this before, Dan, you and I have talked about this, that there's a lot more at play, right? There's all this investment that's pouring in, which is, in theory, great news. But then there's this AI disruption of, that is still are going to have a growing effect on the job creation and getting rid of jobs. Yep. So I think you've got two interesting forces coming to play at one time, especially for a new, an administration that really wants to be talking about the positives.
Well, and I think, look, to be fair, the Wall Street Journal had a great story about it this weekend about inflation. We keep saying this. The economy is not that bad. Like it really isn't. So, I mean, I get why the Trump team is somewhat frustrated. It's not great, but it's also not bad. And that is the kind of anxiety of where's this going? So
the issue is that the president didn't campaign on it, being not bad. He campaigned on making it better. And so
that's the challenge, right? So to Sean's point, they have a lot of bets on the table. And the thought is, imminently those bets are going to start to materialize, and you'll see the train kind of picking up steam. The other side to it is, are the tariffs and all of the kind of chaos going to just stall that and stunt it? So we'll see.
All right. Well, let's go.
It'll be interesting to see how this I mean, your point, Dan, look, in a somewhat slow news, hard fact day, this might rise. How both sides play it is going to be important. I mean, Rachel, I think your industry, how everyone frames what these numbers are is going to be extremely important right now, because without a big story right now, I think the economy, this is going to be sort of the story for today, and how everybody frames it, because both sides are going to say, go to their corners, is going to be important for today as a political story.
Well, there may be another story.
I was going to say there might be another story that everyone else is already texting about right now, literally texting about right now, the Susie Wiles news. But you're right, Sean. I mean, this is the story that everyday average voters care about.
Right.
And it's not the House intrigue of Washington.
Yeah.
Why I think you're right. Why I think this is important is where you get your news today and who you listen to is going to be critical. If you are watching MS Now-ish, you are going to hear that everything sucks and that this is another example. If you're watching Fox or the Daily Caller or Breitbart, you're going to hear the president's policies are working. I guarantee you're going to have a lot of surrogates from the White House out there today, Kevin Hassett, et cetera, who go out there and try to do it. But the reason that I say this is because, this is a classic example, because Dan framed this perfectly. There's a little bit of everything here right now. And so where you get your news, who you listen to, who you follow will be important.
Great flag.
Let's start with the day book, the agenda here today. At 10 a.m., Speaker Johnson and the GOP leadership team in the House, they'll be giving a press conference. This is after they're going to be meeting this morning. We expect a little bit of tension in this meeting this morning, with moderate Republicans being told by the Speaker that the healthcare vote will not include a vote on an amendment to extend Obamacare subsidies. We can talk about that in a few minutes. Democrats will also be doing their competing press conference, as they usually do after their own huddle this morning at 10:45. At 2 p.m., the president participates in an ambassador's credentialing ceremony at the Oval Office. At 3 p.m., the congressional there's going to be a congressional statue unveiling to honor American civil rights leader Barbara Rose Johns. At 8:15, President Trump is going to be participating in a Hanukkah reception in the East Room. As for today's agenda and all the topics we're going to hit, we kind of just talked about the state of the economy, so one done there. We'll talk about Susie getting real candid in this Vanity Fair interview, the White House smoke signals on healthcare, whether we're reading that correctly or not. We'll talk about the latest with Ukraine and Russia, and the president saying that the Senate will actually have a say in whatever is sort of formalized there. We are hearing about potential changes at the FBI, with Fox News reporting last night that Dan Bongino is going to be announcing whether or not he's staying or leaving in the next
hold on a
couple
second.
of days.
Somebody mentioned this might be.
Well, I was just going to say, and if you
Who?
read my newsletter a week before,
Thank you. Always be selling.
We'll get to it. But if you read my newsletter last week, it noted that the White House fully expects him to move on. And then we'll also talk about, let's see, Elon Musk returning to the political circuit, specifically his money. And this blowback former President Obama is seeing for telling Democrats to play nice and downplay their divisions and just win. Not everybody wants to do that, do they, Dan? Okay, so let's start with Susie Wiles getting candid, since we already talked about the economy. The first of a two-part series was published in Vanity Fair this morning. Chris Whipple, who again has written books about chiefs of staff, he got
who's a very respected author.
Very respected author.
No. Okay.
First, actually, I was going to say, somebody just texted me that they've warned people not be careful or something like this. But he's a respected author. But continue.
But I would just say it depends on you. I will say very candidly that he is not. He may be respected by the left, but for folks on the right, he has Trump arrangement syndrome. He's been very, very hostile to conservatives, to everybody on the right. The people that are giving advice about not talking to them, Rachel, are correct. This is not somebody this is like Michael Wolff, if you will. Like, some people, I don't know who they are, might respect him because he's written a lot of books, but he is not somebody that, if you are on the right, and so we can go in. I'll save my.
Well, but he's written books on chiefs of staff. They're not like highly, as a rule, writing about a chief of staff is not it's not like Michael Wolff writing on like the salacious.
No. But go back and read it's not just his books, his analysis. He has never been supportive of anyone on the right. He has been very hostile to Trump in particular.
Okay, enough about Whipple. Let's talk about Susie Wiles.
Yes. No. But wait, hold on. Time out.
I know you're saying it frames everything,
but it does, because here's the point. I said this last week on the Shapiro story. When you get a question as to, a reporter calling you or whatever, or
who you agree with,
the first question you have to ask is, why am I doing this? What do I get out of this interview? There are too many people, as I said, when I do press secretary trainings, they put the secretary in press secretary. They pick up the phone. Hey, boss, so-and-so wants to talk to you. What time should I set it up? If you can't answer the simple question, why are we talking to this person? Does it advance our agenda? Then you are failing. And
always vet that.
Ask yourself with Chris Whipple. Why are we talking to Chris Whipple? Not only Chris Whipple, but why are we talking to Chris Whipple, who is freelancing for Vanity Fair?
I thought the same thing.
Okay, we're going to get into all this in a second. Let's first put up element one so people can see this Vanity Fair story. Quite the photo there. Wow, look at that team of Avengers there.
Yes.
Let me just give. It's
a good photo, by the way.
Vanity Fair story, which is in addition to the Vanity Fair story, which is quite long. Peter Baker this morning did a quick sort of roundup of some of the biggest things that were in this story. I'm just going to tick through a few of them, and then we'll get to this point of Why did they do this, Sean? Susie Wiles said in the interview, in one of the many interviews she did, again, 11 over the course of the first year of President Trump's second administration, she tried to get the president to end his, she said she tried to get the president to end his score settling against political enemies after 90 days, but failed. She said that when there's an opportunity, he goes for it in terms of extracting revenge. She said that the president was not telling the truth when he accused former President Bill Clinton of visiting the private island of sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein. She said she has seen the files. She said that the president has a alcoholic's personality. She obviously grew up with an alcoholic father. And the point she was making here, of course, was that alcoholics have a very big sense of self when they're drinking. They think they can do everything, but the president is always like that. He always thinks he can do everything, that there's never nothing that he can't do. She said J.D. Vance has been a conspiracy theorist for decades, and that his conversion from Trump critic to ally was based, quote, sort of on politics or
for
sort
his
of
Senate
political.
run. Yeah, she's very specific about the Senate run. Yep.
She said that Elon Musk is an avowed ketamine user and an odd duck. She said that Russ
Which,
Vought,
by the way, can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
She then denied that she said that, and the author played for Peter Baker the tape of her saying it.
Oh, wow. See, I missed that.
I've been frantically reading this morning.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple little things, and then we'll get to this because there's just a lot. Everybody should go read this. There's just a lot. Russ Vought, the budget director, she called him a right-wing absolute zealot, which is true. I think he would actually lean into that.
Yeah, I'd say thank you for the compliment.
Right, thanks for the compliment.
Yeah. She said Attorney General Pam Bondi, who, by the way, she's friends with, close. There's the Florida connection there. She said she, quote, completely whiffed in handling the Epstein files this summer, where she gave the binders to the influencers, and then there was no news in it. Anyway, and then let's see if there's anything else.
Oh, she says the tariffs, they're totally divided. And
right.
that the people, the cabinet was advising not to do this now.
Well, hold on, time out. See, because anyway, I'll say that. I will just say on that, we've talked about this extensively, Dan, in the past. There's a difference. There were several people, I don't think the tariffs, and this is where, again, I think having a sloppy, allowing a sloppy journalist to do this, the tariffs, from my understanding, have always been widespread agreement. The difference was the mechanism. So do you use?
That's not what the story says.
I get that, but what I'm telling you is, and maybe that's true. So I don't know, but at least from the people that I talked to, the bigger dispute was the mechanism. So do you go all in using IEPA, the emergency challenges, or just trade dispute mechanisms like 232s, et cetera?
Okay, let's just Sean, you mentioned at the top, you have to know what is your purpose in doing an interview. What was the strategy here, in your view?
I don't know, because it's one thing to do an interview. It's another to do 11. You have a full photographer coming in and doing this. You look at the participants, right? So I think one of the things we got to make sure we explain to people, right, is there. He has interviews with the vice president, James Blair, the deputy chief of staff for political affairs, et cetera. Dan Scavino, I believe, is quoted.
Marco Rubio.
Did you say Vance?
By the way, can I back up one important point about that photo? If we can put that back up, I want to just one of the things, again, that is sometimes you have to look beyond the story. That is the power center of the United States right there.
It's
and
true.
when you talk to people in and around the administration, if you want to talk about who's actually making decisions, who's leading the charge, and I would add Stephen Chung in there, the comms director. But there are, and I might miss one or two. So I'm not trying to, but like I said, I don't think Stephen's in there. But I think that when you think about, or Tom Homan maybe, of who's really driving the train in terms of decision making, that's a pretty good group to start with. I say that because you look at, when you talk sometimes about the cabinet of the president's inner circle. Back with Biden, it was Ricchetti and Zients and some of the longtime folks that have been around him forever. That's your power center right there. And that is something again, when I saw it, that was the visualization of something that sometimes gets overlooked in a story. Anyway, back to this. I think a couple other nuggets. One, reading the Peter Baker grifting version, right? So as you mentioned, Peter Baker of the New York Times basically writes a story off somebody else's story.
He was probably given this to hype it. I'm sure
I was going to say, there's no way
Vanity Fair gave him the exclusive.
Right, But what I'm saying is the version you get of what Susie said in the New York Times story is not the same version that I got.
I agree about that.
There's no context.
It lacks exactly. It lacks the context. And I say that again because this goes back to the economy. Where you get your sourcing matters. Peter Baker makes some very editorial. He adds some of his own left-wing editorialism to his reporting of somebody else's reporting. And so I just caution how you look at this, because I read Peter's story and which is where I think a lot of people are going to read this story today in the New York Times, not the Vanity Fair piece. And the impression you come away with Susie and some of the things she said in the remarks is very different than the Whipple version. So that was it.
But Sean, how does Trump react to this? Because he will read the Times.
That's a great point, because I don't think the way he reads the Vanity Fair piece is somebody prints it off for him, right? Meaning somebody prints it off and says, I thought you'd want to see this. At least back in the day, that was the case. He will read the New York Times story.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say this is going to be interesting, because his reaction to a quote or two in that piece that are out of context is going to be taken very differently than even the left-wing version that Whipple writes in Vanity Fair. But, I went through this similarly with part of the Michael Wolff thing, because I was like, why are we doing this? And it was like, hey, everybody's participating. So I think part of this is, why would you do, like, again, the publication, Vanity Fair comes to you. The answer is no, like, full stop. There's nothing good that comes with it. And Chris Whipple and Vanity Fair is like double no. So, and the extent, honestly, 11 interviews. And by the way, those interviews aren't usually like 3 minutes where it's like, hey, just wanted to catch up. It's let's sit down for 20 minutes and talk about the last, 6 days. Let's talk about these 5 policies. Let's talk about these individuals. I think we said this the other day, or I said this, and we talked about this a little, but the president has had very little drama. And that's a credit to Susie in large part, which is why it's interesting, because they've kept a lot of that out. They've kept a lot of the red on red out. And so by saying these things to somebody who is going to take them out of context, I think, to your point, Rachel, the comment on Trump having an alcoholic style personality, in the context that you read it, it totally makes it's understandable why.
Which is again in the
this idea of how he views, like, that's Trump's style. Don't tell me I can't. The guy's got a winning attitude, and he's like, I can make any deal. Like, that's just Trump. The verbiage used to do that out of context is not going to go over well with.
Well, and also the idea of, like, I told him this and I recommended that, sounds like you're talking, and she has apparently been the genius at not treating him like a child, but like, I work for you, I'm executing your vision. But when you read the New York Times, it comes across more as mom and dad talking to the kid. And sometimes the kid does what he does, but like, I told you not to do this.
This whole story was reminiscent of the Bannon Time magazine cover, where you got a little too much. And that's the irony of this, is that Susie, as she says in the story, has never been an attention seeker.
Yeah.
And so to suddenly do something that puts you in the spotlight with quotes that are not going to go over well. I think
I look at 3 things here. I mean, just you always want to be united, right? You never want to show a house divided. You never want to show that people are kind of inauthentic and doing things for reasons other than like what's in the best interest of the American people. And people in the Beltway may roll their eyes at that, but the average American, this totally throws you off message. Like, this is going to dominate cable news today. This is going to be talked about. Sean, the economy, it was not bad, right? So you want that to be more front and center. And this is going to fuel critics. I mean, for those who don't like Trump, those in the media, Democrats, to now say the indictments are just pure revenge, even though she kind of she puts more meat on the bone of that thinking later on. But the idea that, like, the tariffs, there are total divisions. The idea that J.D. Vance is a phony. Like, we're trying to frame Vance for 28.
Dan, I would say this. Remember, we've talked about this. Don't give a scalp, right?
Yeah.
They've been very clear about this. And this is kind of like, here's a little bit of
scalps.
Well, because it's
Rachel,
saying, I want to tell you. And so I
Rachel,
will be interested. Look, you will never know what Donald Trump really thinks.
Really?
Well, he may. If I had to guess, he writes a story. He tweets out a thing. The Vanity Fair left-wing reporter took a lot out of context. Like, but privately,
Does she survive?
Oh yeah. I mean, look.
Absolutely.
I mean, look, but I think the hardest problem is, why did you sit down 11 times with a guy that has been so, and to your point, this isn't like an unknown factor, Rachel. I mean, there are people, as you saw in your text, who are telling people, stranger danger, stay away from this guy. So I don't
Rachel,
think
people are texting you this morning. What are they saying?
I'm so very jealous. I mean, like, so the access that this guy got is just incredible. No, I think, like, I've been like texting with some people this morning, and I know that he says in the story, like, she agreed all this would be on the record, but I just kept going back to, like, is it possible? Like, she didn't quite, like, maybe she said it at the top and then they didn't talk about it at the beginning of every conversation. Like, I don't know. I just, my mind, and I know other people, because like they're texting too, is like, maybe she didn't think this was on the record. Like, I don't know. That's
so.
Let me,
if we go back to term one, when Scaramucci had his whole blow up, and he said to, I believe it was actually, wasn't it Ryan Lizza?
Ryan Lizza.
He said, I assumed because our fathers are both Italian that we would had some understanding. And it's like, I joke again, I talk about my trainings that I've done. And one of the other things is, don't let people play with matches. That a lot of people who don't deal with the media a lot will say, like, after the fact, okay, that was off the record. And it's like,
can't do that.
Exactly. You can't do that retrospectively. And what happens is, people who, I had this happen to me early on the Hill, when I was the comms director for the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee. We were dealing with Whitewater, and the chairman are very clear that the only people talking to the press are the comms team. We knew that all the other people on the committee were leaking, and they'd get caught. And then they'd come to me and be like, hey, can you help me with the chairman? Because I know I didn't realize I was supposed to say off the record. And I said, no, you weren't supposed to say anything. You were supposed to call me. And I think that, so sometimes people who aren't as familiar with this will agree to an interview and not fully appreciate the background.
She is so sophisticated.
No, and I'm not
Rachel. I cannot believe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just, I can't. That's literally where my head goes. All right, guys, we could talk about this for the full hour, but we've already spent 10 minutes on it. So let's move on here. Question this morning from our text chain: are we seeing a White House smoke signal on healthcare? So just to sort of back up here, Republicans are obviously still, chasing their tails a little bit on this healthcare solution. What do they do about the Obamacare subsidies? A lot of talk about that up on Capitol Hill. But this morning, Politico had this nugget in a story that sort of perked Dan's ears up this morning. The piece is about how there's division in the White House about what to do about the expiring subsidies. Turns out OMB wants to just let them expire. Again, run by Russ Vought, very conservative, not surprised there at all. Political side and some other people obviously pushing back, saying we've got to address something, we've got to do something. But there's this kind of jumbled line in this story, quoting someone close to the White House, saying the president is inclined to maybe even give a 1-year extension to try to pass a healthcare bill. Dan, you flagged this because you were like, oh my gosh, the White House is saying something. Like, just speak to that for a second. I'm skeptical myself, but please go ahead.
Look, I think so. One, the House Republican Conference, as they always do on Tuesdays, is meeting today. And this is going to be one of their big topics, right? What are we doing on this? Because it's front and center and they're getting ready to adjourn. Sean, I mean, I'd be curious your sense. I wondered if that was a smoke signal to the people in the conference. And you have been saying this now for weeks, which is, look, eventually we have to deal with this. There is a bipartisan 1-year extension that the House Republican moderates are pushing that is just like, let's just get this off the table now. And I wondered if that is the White House saying, yeah, we'd be okay with that, guys. As you get in the room this morning, right now, 9 a.m., the White House would be okay. And if enough people get on, Trump would come in to close the deal. The story goes on, which you've always said, he would lean in if the ball is at the 5-yard line to push it over. I wonder if that story was planted because they know everyone in the conference reads Politico before they go into that meeting. And you're of course, the White House talks to the leadership all day, but to the rank and file.
I think it's less Machiavellian because stories evolve over. I mean, as Rachel knows, she worked there. I mean, these kind of stories can take 3 or 4 days to talk to sources. So, I mean, the timing of it, maybe Politico knew that the timing of it would be right. They wanted it to come out Tuesday morning, but I don't even know. These stories can take literally 4 or 5 days, depending on the number of sources and how the story develops. So the timing might have been more on Politico's side than whoever pitched it in the first place. That being said, look, the point to understand in all this is Trump is letting them kind of go through the machinations. I look at this like a CR vote. So sometimes we've talked about this in the past, that a vote, you'll have to let it fail. You have to show people like that wasn't going to work, right? Let them get it out. So sometimes the leadership says, great, I'll give you a vote on the amendment because that way I can say I gave it to you. You can see that you don't have the support. And it also gives members political air cover. I voted to end the subsidies 5 times. Then we were asked, so there is a political cover to this sometimes. And then there's also a political just machination that has to go through for people to see the light. The White House is as I would rather say, like kind of drafting back, if you are using a NASCAR analogy, and saying, you guys, I want you to try it first. You guys go out there, do all these things because they're not going to work. Not because they're not good ideas, but because you don't have the consensus to get 60 votes in the Senate. And so therefore, why weigh in on something that's not going to get there? The president's been clear on his principles, but we all know that the Senate Dems won't allow that to happen. So the point is, do something and get to a place where you go through your votes. Everybody gets the political cover and the opportunity to have their voice heard, and then go back to reality.
Is this also because he doesn't want to have to use so much capital right now? If we all know the end game.
I want to get to that in a second. But first, I just want to make the point that I don't think this was a smoke signal for a few things. Number one, it was sort of buried in the story. It was a person close to the White House. It wasn't a White House official. The thing that I got from this story was more that, like, just surprise about the White House seeming to be unsure of its own power on this issue. There's talk in here about like a concern that if they lean in too hard, they could repel Republicans, or Republicans might go the other way. I think it's totally different. Like, if he wants something done, like, he's gonna have to lean in, and he's gonna have to provide cover for these people, and he's gonna have to knock some heads. I mean, a lot of the Republican leaders want nothing to do with this. I mean, the fact that Mike Johnson is not allowing your majority makers, your moderate Republicans in swing districts, to even get a vote on extending Obamacare subsidies, that tells you right there how adamant he is against doing this. So I think, the president really has to lean in on this. And the fact that they're like kind of squeamish about doing that right now, I think I just found it surprising,
I just think you only have so much capital. And if you lean in and you really have to twist arms for something that, to Sean's point, ultimately it's going to get there, but there might be a little bit of short-term pain, but you preserve more capital. You only have so much.
I don't know.
But also remember this. I guess the key point that I'm trying to make is timing matters.
Right. That's
so it's like money. If you have a bunch of money and you blow it early, then you don't have it when you need it. And right now they're saying, why would we spend our political capital at this point in the process when we know that it's not, like, the Senate still isn't even close? Like, they're both working in alternative universes. The idea is, if we're going to spend our capital, let's spend it when it counts. And that's why
the people losing health insurance.
The why now, though, could be because they're flailing. And I mean, I don't know. I agree with you. Be the closer, obviously be the closer. But like, my point is, I don't know that this stuff's going to go far without his leadership. But anyway, let's move on to our next topic. We've got Russia, Ukraine, some news on this. So after talks in Berlin in recent days, President Trump told reporters yesterday that we are closer now than we've ever been in landing a Ukraine-Russia peace deal. U.S. officials have basically acknowledged or said that 90% of these issues that we actually talked about a little bit last week, if I'm not mistaken, they're landed, right? There's going to be an Article 5 security guarantee for Ukraine,
which is huge,
which is big. Yep, they're hopeful that Russia will allow Ukraine to join the EU. But I just want to make this point because, as they said, there's this saying in politics, right? Nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. And while 90% is a big chunk of the disagreements, it's not 100%. And there are still reporting right now about sticking points, that there's a disagreement still over territorial concessions, which is not a small thing, right? Like, what territory does Russia get? Which territory does Ukraine get? And so, look, I've acknowledged that I'm very sort of skeptical whenever I see these headlines. But Dan, just start, like, how significant do you think this is? Like, is this for real? What is different?
I mean, I think what's new about this is it does seem like there is momentum building, at least on kind of the Ukrainian side, that what was like, oh my God, this is a terrible deal for Ukraine and the Europeans are upset, is now, to Trump's credit, The Europeans were very bullish yesterday, saying that this is actually in a good place. But I think the big development was, if these reports are accurate, the Trump team has told the Ukrainians whatever deal that it is going to go to the Senate, either for ratification if it's a treaty or just kind of a sense of the Senate. And why this is big is you are now going to, people like Mitch McConnell, who are the old school hawks, will now weigh in. So if I'm Ukraine, I like this, right? Because the people who I think are my biggest defenders are going to get a chance to weigh in. And when I think of 2028, I'll just speak to our side. Ruben Gallego, Mark Kelly, Elise Slotkin. What are they going to say? Do you say Trump cut a good deal? Do you try to outflank him just because you know your base hates him? And you're going to start, as Bernie Sanders and others say, terrible deal. Either it's too generous or not generous enough. Politics now will come into this in the extreme. And on the other side, you're going to have J.D. Vance. What does Cruz do? What does Holly do, who's been a little more skeptical about stuff? So I think trying to game out the politics of this now, if a deal is reached and it goes to the Senate, is something for everyone to start thinking about.
Sean, why? I mean, you're always supposed to go to the Senate for a bunch of things, whether it's, tariffs, trade, et cetera. And the president often does not. Why do you think he's going to the Senate or saying he's going to go to the Senate for approval on this? What makes this different?
So I'm actually intrigued on whether it will. I think that's we're taking it as a given. My read on the situation is said that they wouldn't be opposed to doing it.
I see.
Not that they will do it. And I think even if they said that they will, I don't know that I would. And so look, the way I look at this
is like now, talking to Vanity Fair. Why would we actually do this?
Why give them that? So here's how I see this thing playing. Zelensky, in my mind, is actually reading this really well, which is I can't just keep putting my stick in the ground and saying I'm not moving. I have to show some movement. I have to show President Trump I'm willing to negotiate on some things. Land swaps, seems a real difficult hill to bear.
Yes.
Okay, so what do I give them to show that I'm willing to be flexible, to show that I'm serious about this so I don't piss off Trump? Because if Zelensky walks in and says, screw this is totally for Russia, then Trump goes, great, you guys go fight it out, right?
And you're losing. And you're losing on the battlefield. Yes.
Right, and I'm done. Okay.
You have a problem.
So what do? I looked through your list of 10 and I said, hey, you know what? On 9 and 10, I could get there. See, I'm trying. I think everyone wants to read progress into things. And again, I will admit my cynicism on this, but as much what Zelensky's next ask is going to be, number 7 and 8 on that list. And they're going to go, whoa. And then Russia's going to go, oh, sorry. So I think Zelensky's just trying to keep the ball in play.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Totally. Very skeptical. And there was a bit in one of I can't remember which story I read this in this morning, but basically a U.S. official suggesting that it would be Zelensky and Putin themselves, mano a mano, one-on-one, hashing out the final territorial dispute, which sounds like it's absolutely going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about potential changes over at the FBI. There was a Fox News story saying that Dan Bongino will make a decision about his future in the coming weeks. Dan sent this around, and I referred back to the story I wrote last week about all the different suggestions that there was going to be a cabinet sort of clean out. I reported that that's not likely, that there's no plans right now to get rid of anyone, but there was one sort of exception to that, and that was Dan Bongino. And it wasn't that the White House was going to fire him per se. It was that they sort of just, people were telling me he's sort of a non-factor, that there's still this feeling that he put his own self-interest and his reputation with the MAGA universe ahead of the team when dealing with the Epstein files this summer, and that he was, in all sort of intensive purposes, sort of dead to them, and that they not really a factor. And one White House official even said to me, if he resigns or announces he's leaving tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised. So I guess. Sean, do you want to jump in there and start? Like, if he leaves, would you be surprised? What do you make of some of this criticism as well that Kash Patel is getting for how he's been overseeing right now the Brown shooting, which we can go into as well?
So I wouldn't be surprised for a number of reasons, right? I think there's clearly some public frustration about how things have been handled from Epstein to Kirk. Some of it fair, some of it not. But I also think that there's a big difference in coming into government with expectations of what you think is going to happen, right? So if you're Dan Bongino, you were leading your own media company very successfully, and coming in to be number 2 in a bureaucratic agency that reports to another bureaucratic agency can be very difficult, right? You go from being the mayor of a town to a legislative body of 100.
Yeah.
I think, and it's worse because like I said, the FBI is bureaucratic and they report to the DOJ, which is bureaucratic. So if you're a disruptor and a guy that wants to get things done, and by the way, you report to another guy who's sort of the fan favorite. The number 2 at agencies and departments is the doer, right? So you look at Steve Feinberg at DOD to Pete Hegseth. You never hear about Feinberg because he's the guy making the trains run on time, making sure the bills get paid, right? The secretaries, the deputies are that kind of person. And this is a career position that Bongino's filling, not a Senate confirmed political leader. Right. Secondly, they brought in Andrew Bailey, the Missouri Attorney General, to be a co-deputy director. So if you're Dan, you're not even there's a lot of reasons that you're like, hey, I did it for a year. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I'm not getting the change that I want, and walk out. He is one that wouldn't surprise me because I think it's more, it might not be the best personality fit, but we'll see.
I think part of this too is like, I mean, he was front and center on a lot of these conspiracy theories. It's one of the ways he built that media empire. And you're now being marched out to be the team player, to sing from the hymnal that the team has decided to sing from. Yeah. And I wonder
if he leaves. I would be more concerned if he leaves.
That was just going to be my point.
Really
is that he might now go back to his media empire.
Well, he is
now. You're going to have him on the outside popping off about all of this stuff again, when you have a lot of people in that administration that used to be guests on his show that were, repeating the same lines.
There was a nugget in one of the stories saying that he will go back to being a podcaster, and that he intends to sort of use that platform to help Republicans in the midterms.
But can I ask one thing though too, because Kash Patel's taken more heat. That Kash Patel got out in front on the Brown stuff. It turned out to be wrong. He had a similar thing at first around the Charlie Kirk issue. Today, he is on the Katie Miller podcast with his partner, his girlfriend, Kash Patel.
To be fair, that was probably
pre-recorded. Of course, but I don't know if it's pre-recorded, but still, image is everything. And there seems to be, even in the most socially media savvy and, media savvy White House, there seems to be frustration that Patel is always front and center, quick to tweet, quick to be out front, quick to kind of be in front of the camera. Sean, do you think, or Rachel, you're in your reporting, I mean, are they getting frustrated too with not just Benigno, but with Kash, that like, you got to take some of this seriously and step back at times?
Yes and no. Sorry, Sean, let me just mention what I have heard. So like, yes, frustration with some of the headlines, obviously a distraction, yeah. But a lot of times when you talk to people who are allies of his in the administration, who are obviously high up and who talk to the president about how he feels about Kash, like they say he's tremendously loyal. Who else would do the job? I mean, he constantly is taking directions. He's doing what the president wants. And so there's a question of, if not him, who? But also when you look at a lot of the criticism of him, there seems to be pushback from people high up on some of this stuff, like the whole thing about taking government planes. How else is he supposed to go see his girlfriend, who is basically, for all intents and purposes, like his wife? Okay, they're not married, but like they're partners. That was one justification I heard. The other thing about, the security, there was a lot of criticism about him using, a SWAT team to protect his girlfriend who lives in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Someone said to me, like, look, there's a ton of threats out there, and like, there's a reason she has that. So I just think that, yes, there's some frustration, but like not nearly the amount of frustration that you're, if you just pick up, the newspaper.
Let's go back to something that I like to always note. There's a difference between who the they is. Let's get into our pronouns today.
Right.
If it's they is either President Trump, he, him, who that's the ultimate matter. If President Trump
period. There's nothing else after that. Just start with that
point.
and end with that.
Right. He, him, explanation point. If he, him is happy with you, then you're fine. If they, them is not happy with you, then it's not great, but you can survive. And so the question is are some folks not happy? But ultimately, if President Trump is happy with your job performance and how you're handling yourself and how you're representing him and his policies, then you're great. You'll have a Merry Christmas.
Well said. Very 100% true in Trump world. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Elon Musk's return to politics. He's giving to House and Senate candidates again. This is obviously a sign that he's sort of warming his way back into the family after that chilly breakup with President Trump earlier this year. This is a scoop from Axios's Alex Eisenstadt this morning. Just to recap, everyone, he gave a mind-boggling $291.5 million to efforts to help President Trump win. This is a huge deal if he is deciding he's going to put his money behind Republican candidates. Dan, I want to start with you. This has got to be a big concern for Democrats if he's coming in to help.
So, I mean, it is and it isn't, because I think, look, on the one hand, $291 million is $291 million. That is a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that if the average house... Yeah, if the average house race now kind of all in on outside money is like, or the average swing race is like 50 million, that's six, that's almost 6 races now that like Elon is personally going to help you with. The downside is, I do think, and hat tip to Susie, who said in the Vanity Fair story, she would rather Trump focus more on affordability than Saudi Arabia, is the quote that is attributed to her. When you start taking this much money from billionaires and you're constantly seen having dinner with them and inviting them to the White House and they're on the patio, at some point it becomes a liability. And I do think you're going to see Democrats try to turn this into, you're right, Elon Musk owns them. Tech owns them. Big tech owns JD Vance, owns the White House. They're desperate for their money and always doing what they can to make them happy. We are fighting for you. It may not work, but I think there's so much money. Like it used to be when I raised money that much, like George Soros, we got nervous. I can't believe this back in the day. At $5 million was a headline risk. Now we're talking almost 500. Like, I guess that's inflation for you.
Rachel, I know you're not a big sports person, but maybe back in your elementary school days, at some point, all of us were on like a team, right? I remember this, like where you'd play a game, dodgeball, whatever it was. And
I remember dodgeball.
Massive, like lopsided score, like 10-0, right? And the teacher would come in and say, okay, Rachel and Dan, you come over here, and you switch sides. And as Dan is talking, I'm thinking to myself, like the idea that you're saying we're big tech, I'm like, this is so mind blowing that we're at a stage where like big tech is on our side and you guys are rallying against them. First of all, as I've said before, let's just be clear. They're renting us. This is like when Mike Bloomberg ran.
Correct.
This is not Mark Zuckerberg is the biggest phony. And the second that he has a chance to run back to his liberal roots, he will. And so
they are members of the incumbent party.
Yeah, good point. Well, it's like in the House and the Senate, there's 3 parties. There's Democrat, Republican, and appropriators. And so I feel like, that if you go back and roll the tape when Elon ran out of the White House, I was very clear at the time, he's coming back. Like, because he has nowhere to go. Your side hates him. Our side loves his money. And so this was just a question of when that it was going to happen.
And the fact that it's JD and Susie trying to get him back in tells you.
But also, go read what he said the other day. His incentives from Tesla, et cetera, are all based on incentives. And where does he want to put? He needs policies that will enhance SpaceX, Tesla, et cetera. So therefore, he is personally and financially invested in our success now.
I also just think it's cute that, Dan, you're like, Democrats are going to nurse the outrage here. Republicans are going to say, nurse your outrage about all the big money. We'll take the cash and run with it. I mean, money wins elections, like plain and simple.
You'd always rather have more than the other side.
Or like stand on principle, but facts are facts, and this is politics, baby. Okay, last thing here. Obama's not now blowback. So ABC News has this story, or reported this story yesterday. I think former President Barack Obama told House Democrats at an event Sunday in Los Angeles that they should focus on trying to win control of the House, and they shouldn't get caught up in ideological differences that they can, quote, sort through later. But this has obviously gotten a little bit of blowback. Let's put up element number 2 here. Okay, this is a tweet from
my former group chat colleague, Nita Turner.
Yes.
Worked with this big Bernie Sanders surrogate. Yep.
Who also ran as a progressive in an Ohio district, right? And lost the primary. She says she disagrees with the former president. Democratic candidates need to work to get back in line with their voters. Dan, Democrats don't want peace right now. Is this short-sighted, or do you actually think it's good for the party long term?
Well, I think what's interesting is, and Obama's had a few of these moments recently where he's just kind of misread the room. And I think this has exploded because I think that statement hit a tripwire with a lot of progressives, because it's the same thing they were told to line up behind Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie Sanders. Line up behind Joe Biden in 2024, right? He's the only one who can win, right? We got to hold power. Same with Kamala Harris. We can't have a primary. We can't have a debate. Everyone's got to get in line. And I think we've talked about this. The party's, the base's attitude is no more. And Sean, you've talked about this for years. This was one of the things Republicans, conservatives would always hear, right?
Yep.
Mitt Romney, John McCain. We got to go with the most winnable. Let's just get the power. And then, conservatives like, be quiet and we'll find a way to pacify you later. And our party is now like, hell no. I want the fights now. I think we have an element here. Kathleen Clark is now, there's the number 2 in the House, is going to be primaried. Hakeem Jeffries was primaried, but Mandani, to his credit, got that to not happen.
Do you want to show what we're talking about? Like this?
Yeah, let's show this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's element number 3.
Yep.
I'm Jonathan Foss, and I'm running for Congress in the Democratic primary in the Massachusetts 5th District. I'm an organizer, an educator, a former city councilor, and a proud son of Bolivian immigrants. I'm challenging one of the most powerful Democrats in the House because we need new leadership. Let's just call it what it is. Our Democratic leaders are failing us. They're not stopping Trump. They're not making life more affordable. They're not building a party for the working class. That's why we need to rebuild the Democratic Party.
Sean, you've worked on the Hill before. What happens when leaders get primaries like this, and how does that impact like their standing with the caucus? Because all of a sudden people are questioning, are they moving a certain direction because of their primary? I mean, talk about those complications.
I think the answer is it depends. I mean, first of all, both sides generally will, rally around the incumbent. It's their colleague, especially in leadership. There is an expectation. We saw this with like Eric Cantor back in was it when Dave Bratt challenged him that, hey, you're a big boy or girl. Like, we don't need to spend a ton of resources on you because you can raise a boatload of money. So, I mean, there's less concern, but I think it also developed, like, I guess my answer would be like, question mark, we'll see. So the question is, does this dude, like this district's west of Boston, it's a fairly reliable district. I mean, so you don't worry about him until you do. Like, are you going to see wow, we got some early polling back that shows Kathleen Clark's got a problem. But if I can, I just want to put a pin in it because I don't want to forget. There's 2 aspects to this overall dynamic. To Dan's point, like when you're running for president and you want to be the leader, you're right. I mean, there's a whole separate dynamic about whether or not you take the win, which is what we dealt with George W. Bush in 2004, or get sold that like, hey, we're not being progressive enough. What Obama was specifically addressing, and this is where, again, I think the criticism is unwarranted. Yeah. If you don't have the majority, you have nothing.
Yeah.
You have no agenda. You have no whatever. And I've dealt with this similarly for years where people say, like, we need to do this. Okay, guess what? If you're not in the majority, you have nothing. You literally have nothing. And so what Obama is saying rightly to his caucus is to say, hey, guys, if we don't win 218 seats, then we can keep spinning our wheels all day long and saying we're against this, we're for that, we hate Donald Trump, but we can't do anything about it. So if you actually want to do anything you're talking about, then find the most pragmatic, winnable candidate in each district. That's a different dynamic than the presidency. And I think that so it gets lost in the discussion, but he's absolutely right. Because if you don't control the chamber, you have nothing.
Pelosi would say win first, fight later.
Yes.
This was always her argument
But I just think that's just not where our party is anymore.
Right. No.
They don't want to hear it. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about Kathleen Clark is, and I go back to Joe Crowley, because Joe Crowley was the number 2. He was or number 3, I think. He was conference chair.
No. Yeah, he was conference chair.
Yeah, and he was getting ready to, whether Pelosi liked it or not, he was mounting a campaign behind the scenes. What this will do is force Kathleen Clark to look over her shoulder. And on every issue now, you already have Hakeem Jeffries looking over his shoulder at AOC, his neighbor here in New York City, right? If the progressives don't back him, he cannot become speaker if we were to win the majority or just to remain leader. Clark now has to look over her shoulder on every single vote, every single issue. She'll do what she thinks she has to do, but then her team will be monitoring. Is it gaining any traction back in the district? Is this guy because remember, AOC was down supposedly 40 points, then 30 points, then 20 points. And the last poll, I think, had her down 18 points, and she won by 15 points or something. So it's hard to poll a primary. It's hard to know who's going to turn out. I don't know when Massachusetts thing is, but this becomes a little bit of an anchor now. You have 2 members of leadership that are looking over their shoulder, and that's a problem.
That's what I meant.
Remember, that's the other thing. New England has all of our. I mean, almost. It's been a while, but almost every one of the states in New England is usually an August or September primary, so it's very late, which is like super helpful if you're an incumbent.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say when I talked about concern at the top, I was thinking less concerned about her losing a primary, which obviously she should be because, leaders have lost their primaries before potentially. So you got to watch out for that. I was thinking more concerned by other rank and file that now she will take positions that are less, in line with leadership, trying to give cover and more in line with protecting her left flank. But,
yeah, I get you. I mean, I think it's a valid concern. It's something that people will now say, okay, question your motivations a little if you veer outside the guardrails that you've previously been within. But I think that's why it's a wait and see. Like if she comes back with, first of all, how much money does this guy raise? Does anyone endorse him? If it's just a gadfly thing, then no one's going to care. But I think the second that you start saying, hey, some warning signals are going off, that changes things.
Yeah. And remember too, that Senate primary, Markey's being primaried by what's his name. And it's the same generational, it's the same change message that it's time for a new generation of leaders. It's time to replace it. Dovetails nicely.
Let's take some
and I would just say, look, just as a heads up, because I'm here, it's very interesting. This whole shooting that happened the other day, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Whether this issue, the shooting at Brown, stays in the news, if they get anyone. The city of Providence and Brown have all now, everybody's now okay, everything's safe. And yet we have nothing more than a couple of videos of a dude wearing all black.
Guys, let's take some questions. We got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Professor Penny. All right.
Oh, I've heard about the famous Professor.
Oh,
everybody has.
As you should.
Take the class.
The New York Times reporting horrible jobs numbers and unemployment.
All right, let's
actually read it. Well, sorry. Question. Sean, the New York Times is reporting horrible job numbers and unemployment rate going up. Is Trump going to acknowledge his legacy is about to blow up?
Well, first, let me go back to what I said, Professor, at the beginning. I wouldn't expect anything less from the New York Times. As we just said, I think by any objective standard, it's mixed. So I think that no one's looking at the New York Times to set whether or not your legacy is determined by the New York Times. I think how they handle this today, how they talk about jobs is going to matter. And as I said, the economy right now is not what the economy is going to be next August, July and August. And that's what's going to be critical to the president's legacy, to holding the majority, everything. So, and I also think, we've talked about where it is. January, February, there's a trend. If we continue along some shakiness, one thing. If it craters, that's one thing. If it gets better, that's another. But to determine that right now, I think would be very, very premature.
Well, let me just add one thing, because I did not, this is live TV. So I had the sound off and was trying to look at the camera and everybody. apparently they have also reported now that in October, because they, again, did both October and November, we lost 105,000 jobs in the month of October. So I think that may be what Professor Kenny is alluding to. Again, folks, we were talking to each other, talking to you as news is breaking on here, and we have a lean, mean staff. So not that we was not caught, but that obviously that number, a loss of 105,000 jobs, I believe that's the largest outside of COVID, the dramatic shutdown when COVID started. That's probably the largest job loss we've had since the financial crisis. I'm guessing. And so I imagine that will be in the news today.
Not an insignificant thing for us to miss at the top of the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we're it happened just as we came on, and at least CNBC had not said that at first. So I wonder how usually you report on Friday morning that month. This was a unique report. So clearly, because I had CNBC on for the first 3 minutes, it was not on there. So it must have come in a sequence that we didn't quite catch.
Also, oil's getting cheaper, which is good for gas. I mean, so that's why there is well, you think about, again, holiday season, people traveling, the price of oil is going down. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And we'll have to see. Retail sales are also coming out today, and how that's going. Look, I continue to say, and look, I'm a Democrat. I want us to win. I think the economy is not that bad. It is not that good either. And that's, so for Democrats trying to say it's terrible and Trump trying to say it's a golden age, I think the average voter says it's not. But I also believe the average voter is rooting for Trump to be successful. And that is the balance you have to strike.
So remember the whole classic Clinton thing, I feel your pain. Yep. I think both parties have an opportunity now. President Trump, as I've stated, needs to continue this idea of, hey, things are getting better. And I'm going to continue to fight for you. If I were Democrats, I would go on the angle like, hey, you shouldn't be satisfied with this. We can do better, right? Both. This is about promising a better future for both sides, correct, and who wins that argument.
Yep.
We'll see if the president uses those words. I feel your pain. 4 little words make a big difference. Take another question.
But I bet JD Vance does tonight.
He definitely will. Question for Rachel. Oh boy. In Trump's case against the BBC, will he be able to demand to see damning internal emails, film clips that could show malicious intent by the BBC? What do you think of the clip? Well, I guess it depends on if it gets that far. I mean, do they try to continue to offer him settlements? To try to, settle something so they don't have to go to court. I mean, that was sort of the belief.
It's also British law.
British law, and that's much more favorable to.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thinking behind like the ABC settlement, right? The president sues ABC. They end up settling. A lot of people sort of speculated it was because, ABC News did not want to sort of get into the
discovery.
Discovery, because then who knows what turns up and what's embarrassing. So, but perhaps it goes that. Can I just say one more thing about the clip? I mean, the first thing you learn when you start to sort of learn TV journalism and how to put packages together is that you can't just take a clip, here and a clip here that has like 30 minutes of dialogue between them and mash them together. And that is what the BBC did. They sort of grabbed a clip from January 6th with the president saying something about going to the Capitol, and then something else that suggested violence. In reality, he had said, be peaceful, and they took all that context out. And so it ended up being this quote that looked really, really bad. And so that's what this fight is over. And they've apologized. They said they've acknowledged that they did it. The question is, can they offer him enough money to get him to sort of back off and not go to discovery, as Sean said?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot at play here. And this is what's so interesting. Sometimes pulling back the curtain and seeing more, you've got an insurgent new outlet called GB News, where Nigel Farage is. It's backed by a lot of folks. And so if you're the BBC and you realize, hey, if we don't play ball with Trump a little on this, we're completely shut out. There's a bunch here, because you're right. That editing isn't even a close call. Like it's how they portrayed what he said. But the broader point, because I've asked a bunch of really big First Amendment type attorneys, the New York Times v. Sullivan standard. And again, it's where he sues them that matters. Because these are the distinctions that matter. It never aired in the United States. So it was a documentary created by an independent documentary company that the BBC funded and aired on their outlets in England. Okay. So can you sue in U.S. court? Again, a lot of these things are going to matter in terms of discovery, what law prevails, because English law is a lot more favorable when it comes to defamation than U.S. law. We have the New York Times v. Sullivan standard here, and Trump is a public figure, so therefore you'd have to prove actual malice.
Intent.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree with Rachel here. I mean, I don't understand why they did this, because you didn't have to do it. If your point was January 6th was outrageous, there's so much stuff you could have gone with, that why they felt compelled to try to frame, it's so stupid and so feeds the like Trump derangement syndrome. I know we're running out of time here. I don't think we have time for one more question. I have seen in the chat a lot of talk about why did we not address the president's post on Rob Reiner. Look, it happened just as we got off the air yesterday, about 25 minutes. We did not, we try to be forward looking. We try to talk about kind of what's coming. We just felt like enough has been said about that. I personally found it, outrageous, but to sit here and just do like the tribal chest pounding, we just thought was not worth, doing today. You may disagree with us, but I know people are saying, why didn't we spend time on that today? So just a judgment call.
I was going to say, if we just have a couple of minutes, well, we really don't, we're out of time. But I am curious Sean's take on that. If he thought the president crossed the line there.
Look, again, I've always said this, for after 10 years, if you think something that Trump said is outrageous, you've been sort of, said something new that's going to blow up everything. No. Look, I've always said this before. I mean, the president's got his own style. He's been very effective at how he does it. In this case, obviously, this was a very tragic event. I don't agree with Rob Reiner's politics, but the idea that, allegedly his son felt so aggrieved or whatever, has mental health issues, that he would kill a mother and a father. Is a very sad thing to have happen. Those are moments where I kind of go, that's really not, I know that Rob Reiner has said some very nasty things accusing the president. And I understand why he'd be outraged by Rob Reiner, but the idea that a tragic event like that occurred, sometimes you just need to sit it out.
And that's why I said on X, watching the outrage of everyone screaming about Trump. Again, I totally found it abhorrent what he said or posted. But when everyone spins up that, like, that's it, he should be impeached, and, others rushing, I just, like, it's when I'm like, oh, I hate politics some days. So we just thought it was not, if you've seen it, you tend to have an opinion, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. And just a reminder that it was not just obviously Democrats and moderate Republicans who were balking out this. You got Joe Concha saying completely inappropriate. Don't love this, to be honest. Raheem Kassam, Tim Pool, Trump has personal reasons to be upset with Reiner, but he can do better. This is not appropriate. Rob was very gracious when Charlie was murdered. We can return that grace. So definitely a lot of people didn't like it. Okay, well, that's all we have time for. Sean, anything you want to flag that you have coming up?
Who's on tonight, Sean?
Well, first of all, last night, and this is one of the things that's interesting. If you go back, Dershowitz, we brought up Trump's third term. And again, as a layperson, the way that Alan Dershowitz parsed the 22nd Amendment and said, look, here's what it said. And he went back and showed every revision of the 22nd Amendment, how the framers and the founders, it was a fascinating discussion about whether Trump can serve a third term. And Dershowitz, again, goes through this in a way that I had never heard anybody. He revealed for the first time that he's got a book coming out about Trump's potential third term in 2028. Again, he is a Democrat and a scholar more than he is a supporter of anybody. I thought the discussion was great. Tonight is Jim Jordan. We're going to talk a lot about Arctic frost and these investigations, Clinton, whether or not Clinton will and should testify in front of the House Oversight Committee, and obviously, the jobs numbers and everything. So
I think tomorrow, one of our topics is Barack Obama, Donald Trump, who's, 2028.
So, the funny thing about that, Dan,
here we go.
I think the greatest job in America is former president. And I don't know why anybody who's ever, I think in office, the vice president, as I mentioned at JD's thing the other day, like the vice president's got a great house. No one traipses through. You've got your own pool. And it's like being vice president, I think, is a great job. And so I don't know why, but afterwards you lose your Secret Service and everything. The president, you get all the trappings and all the glory, but you don't have to do the job anymore.
Who would Barack pick as his VP? Like, let's start the game. I mean, let's
no. Yeah, you know that Michelle doesn't want to go back. She's been very clear about that.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have a lot to break down tomorrow because there'll be a reaction to the jobs numbers, the breakdown of the Susie story.
How JD Vance in Pennsylvania tonight. We'll be able to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, guys. Yep.
And let's not forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, go to @the DC Huddle on YouTube. Subscribe to our new YouTube channel. Trying to build subscribers there. And sign up for our email.
Instagram. It's on all sites.
We doubled our YouTube numbers yesterday. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, we did. We picked up several hundred people yesterday on our new YouTube channel. So keep it up.
And for everyone who's asking, obviously this will be available on audio and all that. Like, slow your roll, folks. It's Christmas. We got to do a lot of shopping still.
One thing at a time for building the show. We're literally building it as you're watching it. So
if you notice, we have elements here. We've got some little things. We're getting there.
We're got a Twitter handle. I mean, we'll get there. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Everyone,
we'll see
including
you back
family members.
tomorrow.
I had some. I've gotten a little blowback on my title today. I had fun yesterday. Apparently, I didn't use capitals, so I figured out how to change it, and I made myself.
Come on, he's got a blinking Christmas tree going, folks. It's the holidays. That's fun.
I'm having fun. It's the holidays.
We love America. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Be back here tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.